name is David Deloria. I work with Commerce Guys, and we basically specialize in building e-commerce sites, and we choose to do so in Drupal. In doing that, we wrote our own shopping cart software. We call it Commerce or Drupal Commerce. Ryan Zarama wrote that, and he also wrote UberCart. So we basically, if I step back for a minute, Commerce Guys got started by building e-commerce websites in Drupal 5 and Drupal 6 with UberCart. And we basically took all the lessons that we learned from that and rewrote a new shopping cart, called it Commerce, which is a kind of a no assumptions, more of a framework approach, less of an out-of-the-box solution that, should you want it to behave in a way that it doesn't out of the box, then you have to get into kind of bending it and breaking it in order to make it behave the way that you want. Commerce is instead a more bare bones approach where all the pieces are there and you can configure it to behave exactly how you want it. And then to go back and address the out of the box functionality that a lot of people like to see and it's helpful. We created a distribution of Drupal with Commerce called Kickstart, and over the summer we released Kickstart 2, which just has a lot of UI improvements and theming and just a lot of fit and finish that the original version of Kickstart was lacking. So in any event, over the course of since 2008, and then personally my experience with Commerce Guys since 2010, for the last 2.5 years, we've come across a lot of different scenarios involving PCI compliance, the questions that come up that are common, the concerns that are there, and basically also the solutions that are out there that work and the solutions that are out there that can get you in a bit of trouble. This presentation specifically is to more make aware. You'll get a high level overview of what PCI is. We're not really addressing how to make an entire site or even an instance of a site or the payment portion of a site PCI compliant. I think the statistics are that it takes on average about somewhere around I want to say 2.5 years to reach full PCI compliance. That's just on average. And there are generally larger shops, Walmart.com or something like that, Amazon. They often have an entire team just dedicated to making sure that everything is adhered to and appropriate for that. So we will not be addressing how to make your site PCI compliant because that's an adventure in and of itself. What we will address is what solutions are out there that are PCI compliant that you can use for your site or for your customer's site, and what solutions are out there that you should probably avoid or at least know what you're getting yourself into or getting your customer into. So as I said before, I work for Commerce Guys, and we're an e-commerce company. We're headquartered in, at least now we are, headquartered in Paris, France. We originally started up in Jackson, Michigan. We now have an office in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is just down the road a little bit. So we're just down the road from U of M, which is a lot of fun and also provides a lot of traffic. And we recently opened an office in London. And that just happened over the summer and is still very much getting up on its feet. If you know any Drupalers in London looking for a job, tell them to let us know. Similarly, if you feel yourself inclined to want to leave this glorious weather and move up to Michigan, we'll do our best to make it worth your while. But so basically, the general rule is that we're always hiring. So there's my shameless plug. We've recent achievements, basically. Gartner named us one of their cool vendors. Microsoft, and if you don't know, Gartner is like a market research agency. And Microsoft invited us to their BizSpark 1, which we were pretty excited about because there's something like only 20 startups worldwide were invited to that. I might be slightly off on that number, but nonetheless, it was a small number, and we were one of them, so we were happy to take part in that. And we've worked with a variety of people. So again, we'll be covering what PCI is, kind of at a 40,000 foot view, how it was done in the past, either before PCI existed or even early on in its existence. I'll give you a couple of case studies that we've seen that unfortunately are not that uncommon. Talk about what the new status quo is, where the industry is really going, particularly when it comes to smaller merchants. And then a review, just an overview basically of the do's and don'ts. And then, of course, at the end, there will be time for questions. So PCI, the official name is the PCI Security Standards Council. PCI unofficially stands for the payment card industry. You will not find that anywhere on their website, but that is it used to stand for that at least, kind of how KFC used to stand for Kentucky Fried Chicken. It was formed in 2006, so it's a relatively new organization, and a common misnomer, misconception is that they're somehow a government agency or that they have any kind of official regulatory power. That simply is not the case. They are just a non-for-profit standards body. Basically, the five major credit card brands, or at least the five major brands globally, MasterCard, Visa, Amex, Discover, and then JCB, which stands for Japan Credit Bureau. Japan Victor Company is an electronics company, my mistake. And they came together and basically said there's a huge problem with identity theft and with card information getting stolen. For us to uphold our agreements with cardholders that if fraudulent activity occurs, they will not be responsible for it, and also to uphold a certain level of convenience and accessibility to merchants, we need to create just an industry-wide standard to follow that, if followed, we believe will minimize the risk of PII information, which is personal identifiable information, that will limit the amount of the risk that information can get leaked or stolen, but also provide a certain level of accessibility and convenience to those who want to use any of these cards, because, you know, as anybody in this room knows, that we're more and more becoming a cashless society. That doesn't seem to be a trend that's going to reverse anytime soon. They do have certification and enforcement bodies. In other words, different companies or other organizations that they will endow to go in and do an inspection to certify that you are indeed PCI compliant. And they do, as per the user agreements that you agree to when you accept these types of cards, they can levy certain types of penalties or fees, again within the scope of the contract that you have as a merchant. But again, there's no legality to the organization to where they can come in and, I don't know, it's not like they can seize your assets or anything like that. They could pursue you with a lawsuit, and that's pretty much the extent as far as their legal ramifications. PCI DSS is which stands for Data Security Standard. That's kind of the I guess the overarching standard that you would want to adhere to as an online merchant, or as anybody storing sensitive information like that. It's a holistic view of, again, that PII data handling, looking at the entire system, or at least any part of the system that information touches, even if it's for a fraction of a second, even if it never hits the database. If it touches the machine in any way, it's within scope. It has policy, software, procedure, and security management requirements. In other words, to become compliant, you're not only saying that your system is built in a certain way and that's maintained in a certain way, but all the way down to the access to the server room itself has to reach a certain standard. So it's a pretty far-reaching standard to achieve. And again, it's one that you do need to achieve to be PCI compliant, should you want to be. So to revisit briefly, basically, the main topic of this conversation is how to provide PCI compliant applications to your merchants without them having to be PCI compliant. So that's more of a, I guess that slide was speaking more to the extent that you have to go through to actually become a PCI compliant vendor. PADSS, which is just Payment Application Data Security Standard. This is kind of the seal of approval that you can get as a software provider or a service provider who is providing payment services. So Authorize.net, I'm sure, will tout that they are PADSS certified. In other words, they can't say that, well, while their infrastructure is PCI certified, specifically their service is certified as a payment application. So you can use it knowing that once the data reaches their infrastructure, as long as you're reaching it in the way that they intend, that it's going to be secure to the PCI standards. Really, the short note here is make sure that the provider that you would choose is has this the PADSS certification.
And how would you, is that something that typically display that on the website somewhere?
Yes, and you'll see it more and more. It's becoming, as I guess throughout the 90s, as HTTPS became a more and more important thing, saying that, we're going to encrypt your information as it's sent over the wire. And so with VeriSign and different types of services out there who will, I guess, certify that you are following the protocol correctly, this is definitely becoming equally as big of a deal in the payment industry. So how it was done is kind of the next thing we'll talk about. And basically, API-based payment processing, where you collect all of the information yourself and then just ping a payment provider remotely to actually have the card processed. You get back a response saying, yes, it's approved, or no, it's not. That's really that's kind of how e-commerce got started at its core. You still see a lot of it, and it's still a really popular thing to do. So in the Drupal sphere, if you were to go to Drupal.org and look at any baseline payment module, it's probably using this method. If you just look at the authorized.net module for either UberCard or Commerce, it's probably using this method, or I could say that those are using this method. And it's pretty much true across the board. PayPal, not so much, because they've sort of made their name in being a different sort of payment provider. But nonetheless. It's a great user experience, and it's a user experience people have come to expect. You never leave the site. You end up at the end of checkout. You're giving your information to the people you clearly trust enough to buy a product from them and hand over money before you have the product in your hand. So you just, I guess, people tend to extend that same credibility from a business perspective to online security. And so it's generally your conversion rate will go down if you send people off site. So people have always frowned away from that and favored this sort of a payment method. And if it's done correctly, so I'll say correctly, not by PCI standards necessarily, but just by best practices of a few years ago, it's fairly secure in that if you never let the information touch your database, technically you're never storing it. Now there are form caches and there are other things that if it touches your machine, it does exist for at least a fraction of a second, so it is within PCI scope, but people kind of brush that off as, well, we're following the spirit of the law, if not the letter of the law. And that's, well, we're not storing customer information, so we don't need to be PCI compliant. We're simply passing it through to the payment provider so that we can get a response and complete the transaction. And this was pretty acceptable, and just about everybody did that, because again, what merchant is going to sign on to losing it 5% of their orders because the minute you send them off-site for payment, they get a little nervous and just walk away. The problem is that it wasn't that far of a leap then for people to say, well, now we can do card on file. I mean, we're already passing through the card information. If we do just go ahead and collect it and store it, then that card is available then for people in the future. I mean, Amazon is doing it. We need to be able to compete with Amazon, right? So why don't we just offer card on file? Perhaps they'd encrypt it, perhaps they wouldn't. Either way, it doesn't really matter, because at this point, you're not even adhering to the spirit of the law. You're storing credit card information. You're definitely within PCI scope. It hasn't stopped people from doing it in the past, but more and more people are starting to, merchants rather, are wising up and not doing it as much. You don't see it. Let me reword that. You don't have it requested as often. There was a time where merchants, especially if you were a smaller merchant, thought maybe it wasn't that big of a deal just to store credit card information. I trust my employees. I have a secure system. I'm doing it through HTTPS. It just, what's the worst that could happen? Yeah, right. Maybe they just hope that nothing bad will happen. A few minutes ago, I hoped that they weren't out of chocolate chip cookies, and where that got me is I had an oatmeal raisin cookie. So it's like, I guess maybe hope sometimes works out. And then once you have the card on file, then it's even easier now to offer things like recurring. And if you offer a subscription service, or if you offer a membership, like you're an association, a recurring is pretty much vital. If you require people to come back and purchase an order or a membership or whatever, every time that recurrence comes around, you're going to lose a portion of your customers. So naturally, then people started using it for that. And that in and of itself, I guess if you're storing the data I guess that you're using it in a recurring fashion isn't necessarily evil by itself. But this, I think, added to the appeal of storing card data, is that you want to be able to offer this service, and this was simply the lowest barrier to entry. We can integrate into our back-end ERP. Now we can just drop out the order object, payment information and all, into our back-end ERP, and this will help us follow the business model that perhaps we followed when we were just a catalog company or a phone order company, where yes, we will approve the order up front, but we won't actually charge your card until it ships out. That's kind of the classic business model, and one that most businesses still would like to adhere to if it's technically reasonable. And if you can just go to your website and just print out all the orders in plain text and have all the order information there, and then give it to your fulfillment warehouse, just like you have for years with catalog orders, then of course there's going to be appeal with that. And if you're looking at it no differently than a catalog order, then you probably might not see the risk in it. So let's look at a couple of examples of people who perhaps have partaken in these practices. Let's take clothing company. Clothing company sells clothes. They started as a catalog company and a phone order company, and they've done fairly well with that. But over time, this thing called the internet pops up, and they're like, well, and I guess it only makes sense to sell clothes on the internet. I mean, we are a clothing company, and the internet is there. Let's put the two together. Well, they had an entire fulfillment infrastructure set up based on phone and catalog orders. They already had their ERP in place. They had business practices. They had a loyal clientele. They had a lot of things going for them. So the simple thing for them to do, and this is what they did do, is just collect all of the payment information online that you need to complete the transaction, and just export it. And in this case, export was literally printed out on a work order, and then hand it to your fulfillment department so that they can do what they do with any other order that they receive. In clothing companies' defense, this practice started before PCI existed. So as far as nowadays, even doing that outside of e-commerce, you'd still be in the PCI scope if you're processing credit card information at all, either over the phone or on a snail mail submitted form. And so this company wasn't necessarily doing anything wrong, but even without e-commerce, now you would still be in PCI scope just by storing that information in-house, be it on paper or digitally. Fortunately, there's no catastrophe with this particular example. No hackery occurred. Nobody stole a drawer of the file cabinet with all of those past orders in there with business credit cards and whatever else, and ran off with it. Nothing came of it, and fortunately, while she was working with us, we brought to her attention the necessity of becoming PCI compliant, and so Clothing Store did indeed become PCI compliant, and still is able to export to her back-end ERP and do everything else that this business has been able to do since its inception. On the other hand, we have Intelligence Company. Intelligence Company is more services based. They don't actually sell any products. They basically sell these reports of various types of activity that might be valuable to various types of customers. Some of these customers are high profile customers. They needed recurring. They sell one-off reports, but they also sell subscriptions on a monthly or a quarterly or even an annual basis. And they've got a pretty complex marketing scheme that they use as well, where they're always running different promotions, and they want to give people free segments of time and this and that and the other thing. And really the only reasonable way to deal with that was for them to have all the creative authority to create these different recurrences of their services on the fly. And the easiest way to do that is to just simply store all the payment information so it's there to use when you need to use it. Turns out they weren't as lucky as clothing company. They ended up getting hacked by a fairly high-profile group of hackers in a fairly high-profile way. Some of their high-profile clients ended up making some fairly generous donations to various organizations without even knowing it. Resulted in a lot of bad press for some of their clients, definitely resulted in bad press for them themselves. Needless to say, they had zero desire to jump back into a situation where they were exposed to all the different ramifications, both from PCI and their clients themselves. Meanwhile, they're not collecting any revenue because they had to, basically all of their clients had to destroy all of their payment information, and they had to get rid of all of their information as well. Needless to say, that was a fairly intense project to get them back up and running as soon as possible without taking any shortcuts. Those two tend to be opposing forces. So the new status quo, one is the payment redirect. That's not necessarily, I wouldn't call that a status quo, and it's not a new technology. It's something that's existed for a while. It's never been that desirable, and in a lot of ways it still isn't. Again, whenever they try to create a payment page for you that matches your theme and everything, some of them do a pretty decent job of it, but it's usually still fairly apparent to the user that you're leaving the page going to a different, you're leaving the site rather going to a different page, inserting fairly sensitive information and getting redirected back to the site to complete your order, and hopefully nothing goes wrong in that whole process. Hopefully this isn't a phishing scheme, and hopefully everything is as it ought to be. CyberSource Hop, they do a pretty good job of offering this service, as good as it can be, again, given the nature of how the service works. And of course, there's many others. PayPal is an example, and the list goes on. This is a fairly low-level, easy one to get into. So depending on the shop that you're dealing with, or the shop that you may have, it's not necessarily a solution that doesn't deserve being considered. It all depends on the budget, and it depends on, so what does a 5% drop in conversion mean to you? And if that drop could be a lot less than the development work required to have a better solution. Oftentimes it's not. And fortunately, the industry keeps plowing forward with better and better solutions, continuing to try to bridge the gap between being PCI compliant and having something that is actually accessible to your everyday merchant. So there's what I would call iframe payment fields. A lot of them technically are not iframe, some of them are. That's effectively where you're just taking the actual checkout form and specifically the billing information. You're just inserting either their own form and submitting the information directly to the payment provider or the payment gateway, or you're using just a separate set of fields that do submit directly to them, and then usually you have hidden fields that then store a response in the form of a tokenized credit card number. So that way your servers, the eMerchant's servers, never see any of the information. It goes directly from the user's browser to the payment gateway's PCI compliance system. It gets pre-approved, and oftentimes the first step, it doesn't even get pre-approved. They just send back, they just tokenize it and encrypt it, send back a token to the user's browser, which then submits that token back to your Drupal server, Drupal in this case, so that you can then ping the payment gateway with the token and run the process just like you would with the API-based solution, except you're using a token instead of credit card information. So it completely removes the Drupal site from PCI scope, because you never see anything more than a token that is completely worthless outside of that specific transaction. A couple of great companies are Braintree and Hosted PCI. We've worked with both of them, and we've had great results. It's a completely transparent result to the end user. It's the same exact form fields that you'd expect to see anyway. It's just where they're being sent to is a different location. So one of the tempting things about storing credit card data was offering more advanced services like card on file and ultimately recurring. to go with the one of the approaches that we've laid out, you'd have to make sure that you use a vendor that actually provides card on file services. In other words, it's one thing to send a request, get back a token, complete the transaction, and then everything just basically resets for the next transaction or whenever. That it's a one-time use token. They would probably discard of the payment information after the transaction is complete, etc. It's another for them to store that information, keep the token and that specific credit card information mapped together so that you can use it again in the future. There's a vault service or a wallet service or something that you have to sign on to additionally beyond just the payment gateway services. Not everybody provides that, but again, it's becoming commonplace, so you're going to see it more and more. There are some third-party vendors as well, where you can use a payment gateway of your choice, and you simply can interact with the vault supplier, and then they will process payments through the payment gateway. Those, I think, are going to be obsolete before long because really every payment gateway is soon going to offer their own vault service, and it's probably always going to be cheaper to go with a more completely packaged out-of-the-box solution. So, to review do's and don'ts, don't use an API-based solution from a non-compliant environment. API-based solutions are great as long as the front-end server that's making the request to the payment gateway is PCI compliant. Your average mom-and-pop e-merchant it's not cost conscious to go through the PCI compliant process. So basically, unless you're a level 1 merchant doing over 6 million transactions a year, you're probably not going to go through the trouble to be PCI compliant. Don't ever store payment information in a non-compliant environment, just ever at all. Assume you must bring your web server into PCI scope. You should never assume that either. Again, there are plenty of ways now to completely separate your web server and your e-store from the PCI scope, and don't take shortcuts. But do deploy a solution that keeps payment info off your servers. Keep UX in mind. That's important because UX is money. It's every barrier you put between your customer and the final transaction, there's going to be a drop in conversion rate. Going off-site to make that payment is certainly a barrier. Take the time to shop providers for one that fits your needs. They have different cost structures. They have different services that they provide, and right now it's still a little bit wild in that you have to do your homework to see, okay, we can use Braintree as basically the collector of sensitive information. They will happily integrate with any payment gateway, virtually any payment gateway out there, or they'll supply you with the use of their own payment gateway. And then beyond that, depending on your payment gateway, you can select a different card processor to actually run the transaction as the final step. So there's multiple pieces of the puzzle to put together. Most gateways offer the beginning to end solution. Depending on the type of merchant you're dealing with, they may either want to maintain some sort of flexibility because they don't want to get locked into a contract with all of those different services for an extended period of time, and there may be other reasons. But do your due diligence before recommending a payment gateway to your client, and depending on the type of work that you pride yourself on, perhaps you just want to provide development services for your client, and whatever they want, you'll do. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. And so, sure, if they just come to you with the desire to use a payment gateway, then you can just go with that. But this is, I would say that this is kind of a vertical where it's worth offering the expertise and being a knowledgeable deployer, so that way you can make a recommendation and feel good about it. We literally had the conversation with ourselves, like, well, so this customer really, in order to maintain their business practices, really wants to do something that we really don't think they should do. So do we do that for them in the name of customer service because that is what they want, or do we instead dig our heels in and say we are not happy putting you in a situation that we know could end really poorly? And we ultimately decided we choose to be the experts in our field, so we are instead going to offer you solutions that we know are healthy, rather than allow you to go down the road that could lead to disaster. So that's it. Any questions? Yeah.
So the authorized.net module, what does it actually offer as far as the method of payment? Because you were talking about the API and you went through
If you're talking about, so authorized.net, there's an interesting relationship there in that they are actually owned by CyberSource, which is another payment gateway offering, and CyberSource is owned by Visa. So, and I only say that to say that CyberSource and AuthNet offer the same service effectively in different ways, and they have very different cost structures. Namely, that if a smaller e-merchant should favor authorized.net, larger ones CyberSource. So that said, if you are looking on DrupalCommerce.org and you just go to Commerce AuthNet, that is the API-based solution. So it would only be appropriate in terms of PCI compliance to deploy that in a PCI compliant environment, which most merchants are not. It's almost an oxymoron in that AuthNet is designed for smaller merchants, but yet that specific solution is going to put that smaller merchant within the PCI scope. There are, AuthNet does offer other services now, and it's the open source community, so as projects are willing to fund the advancement of those modules to leverage AuthNet's other services that are more conducive to a smaller merchant being PCI compliant, those modules will get developed as well. And we're always happy to accept help on those also. Because again, even just going back a couple of years, it was pretty much acceptable to use something like the AuthNet module from a web server that was not PCI compliant. Again, saying that, well, you're following the spirit of the law. Commerce is not storing any of that information. It is just passing it through. Just in the last couple of years, a lot has changed in that probably just because of legal exposure and things like that. The payment card industry as a whole has been cracking down on that. It's something I didn't mention earlier, is that PCI does not actually hold themselves responsible or accountable for making sure that people who are compliant or say that they're compliant are compliant. It is up to the actual payment card companies, Visa, MasterCard, and et cetera, to hold their merchants accountable for being compliant. And so basically, in PCI's early existence, they didn't. It was, yeah, it was just, yeah, Visa, honestly, they weren't, the cost of dealing with fraudulence was much less than the cost of putting in a system that deterred fraudulence. So they just dealt with it.
So what's the solution for the small merchant?
Well, so if you wanted to use authorized.net, you could use a solution like a middleman type solution like Braintree or Hosted PCI, where they will handle the information for you, and then they can pass it on then in a secure way to AuthNet or whoever else you want.
So if you're using an API instead of, what were you calling them, iframe?
Yeah.
Instead of using an API, you need to be PCI compliant.
Right, because then if you're just using the strict API-based approach, then that information is hitting your server before it's being sent off to authorized.net or whoever the gateway is.
What did you, I'm trying to catch the difference between being compliant and these days actually having to be certified.
Well, so being compliant just means you are following the standard. So whether or not you have been investigated and certified that you are following the standard, or you just know that you are, it's, I'm just saying compliant is, and meaning that you're following the rules, so to speak. Well, if you want to be certified PCI compliant, because you can basically reach a level of compliance with a self-examination questionnaire where you effectively just answer some questions. Depending on the answer to those questions, they'll say you're compliant, because effectively, if the answers to your questions are saying that sensitive information never hits any box that I own, and the people that I am using who are handling the information are, PA DSS certified, then they're going to say, okay, you are certified, and they'll do nothing more than like a quarterly electronic scan of your network to make sure that what you're saying is true, and then it goes no further than that. So yes, while it's not necessarily true to say that to be PCI compliant, you have to be, you have to go through, millions of dollars of certifications and everything like that. It's, I meant that more in the context of to be PCI compliant and to ever handle sensitive information, you have to go through, again, what Gartner is saying on average takes 2.5 years and $2.1 million. So it's, the solutions that we exposed in this session are basically to keep you at the lower level merchant runs, so where you can just fill out a questionnaire and be considered compliant as an e-merchant. I hope that helped cleared it up. I kind of stumbled around with my words there, but.
So what you're really saying is for the smaller merchants, either do the redirect offsite or the iframe, and those are your choices.
Yes, that's the gist of it.
Direct module and make that work as that.
Yeah, you can still use authorized.net as a payment gateway if you'd like, but put somebody in the middle to handle the information for you. Exactly. Yes.
Authorized.net has what they call their CIM service, which is their version of card on file. Is there a iframe solution right now for Drupal that we would be able to take advantage of their card on file service using an existing, but also using the iframe? Is there an iframe solution for that?
Not that I'm aware of, because we've only used CIM in the, so again, for the sake of the recording, the question is there an iframe-based solution that can still leverage Authorize's CIM service? And again, so not that I'm aware of, other than you could probably, I'd be willing to say that you could put together a system that used something like Braintree or hosted PCI to pass the information to Authorized.net in a secure, compliant way. And then from there, you could leverage their CIM service, because once you receive the token back, then you could speak directly to Authorized.net for anything in the future. So for recurring and things like that, it would not always have to go through the middleman service, so to speak.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah, because it's, again, the idea is to get back a token, and then you can just speak directly to the payment gateway in the future and process transactions and everything else, because that token is mapped to the credit card information.
How about modules just for iframe without card on file? Drupal modules.
Yeah, so there will be, so at Commerce Guys, we're putting together what we're calling a marketplace, and it's basically just a listing of modules that we certify, or if you will, so not to use the same word in too many different contexts, but where we stand by the quality and the functionality of that module. In many cases, it's because we ourselves wrote the module. That's still kind of something that's up and coming and being put together, so it's, but yeah, in the very near future, there should be a pretty comprehensive list of these are modules that you can use with Drupal Commerce, and you can expect that it's going to behave in a way that you expect it to. And Braintree is something that we're working on right now to be in marketplace. I believe hosted PCI is as well. So both of those solutions, while they're not done and they're not ready yet, will be fairly soon. Yeah.
So let's say you have a client or somebody you're working with, like a level 4 merchant, so it's a little larger than a mom and pop shop, but I mean still pretty small. And the solution that they want is not PCI compliant at all. Like they want to store a credit card in plain text, or even with a salted field, just so they can actually run it on like a manual terminal.
Mm-hmm.
How would you approach that? I mean, would you, after you've presented the best solutions and the best practice solutions, and they're still insistent on choosing that non-PCI compliant, would you just would you just say no, or would you go through the for customer service sake and actually just go through and do it, and maybe you have like a waiver or something that you have to sign to say you're not, or you at least presented the
So,
options?
so to me, the decision to work with a client who wants, and really this goes beyond e-commerce, the decision to work with any client who wants to do anything that is considered either outside of best practices or maybe downright unscrupulous or reckless, that really is a personal and or business decision. So again, the decision we made at Commerce Guys is we really want to be, we want to learn and know everything that there is about e-commerce, which is just a really broad sweeping statement. But nonetheless, that was our goal, is to continue to be on the cutting edge of e-commerce. And we are going to participate in projects and advise our clients on how to live in that realm. So we made the decision that yes, if a client wants to come to us and do something that we know is completely, not only one, non-compliant, but two, frankly, it's reckless to your customers, because as people expect you to do things within best practices, if you are participating in not doing them in best practices, you're doing them a disservice. Then it's so yeah. I feel like I'm loading now the answer, but nonetheless, to me, that would be a business call. And at Commerce Guys, we made the business call that we're going to participate in advancing the world of e-commerce within best practices. So we would probably choose not to take on a project like that.
So, and I may have missed it, you may have already said this, and I just didn't catch it. So, before, we had the, say, authorized that net, so the API would just went straight to them and they took care of it, right? So, to be PCI compliant for the merchant, now we have this additional middleman, Braintree or something like that.
There's a number of them out there, yes.
Right.
Yep.
So, and you may not have to answer this, so I'm like, well, why isn't that authorized.net or those alike? Why aren't they implementing that same solution, which it seems to be the tokenized based solution?
They-
It's like, why we got these extra pop in here?
I can almost promise you that all of any major player in that world is creating their solutions. So again, yeah, to answer your question, any a major payment gateway is doing everything they can to be the beginning to end service provider for your payment needs, including, as the industry moves this way, to solutions that remove your site from PCI scope. In the back.
Yeah, you mentioned that the card on file module is coming along. How robust is that for recurring payments integrating with the iFrame solutions?
Well, so card on file it's as good as the information that you feed it. So it's great in storing the tokenized information and then you can then use that information to process payments and everything in the future, using other modules such as installments or recurring and things like that. So if you acquire that token in within best practices or outside of best practices is another question. So in other words, yes, card on file will work great for what you're suggesting, and if you acquire that token by using like an iframe approach or something like that, then yeah, you have a completely best practices or compliant site that offers all of the functionality of that having card on file does.
And the blue O?
What's that?
The blue O?
Well, so it's too small to see here, but there's a Drupal drop in there. So yeah, that's something that you would on the bigger logos is a little more apparent. All right, is that it? Well, thank you.